Hi, I'm Dan Lagani with Silver Solutions, and welcome to a very special two-part episode of AgeWise. Today, we dig into one of the more troubling problems for older adults in America, and that's hoarding. We sat down with our guest, Dr. Michael Tompkins, a couple of weeks back. He is a clinical professor at UC Berkeley. He is also a founding partner of the San Francisco Bay Area Center for Cognitive Therapy. If you have someone in your life that suffers from excessive clutter around the home and you're concerned about safety issues, this is absolutely an episode of AgeWise you'll appreciate. Dr. Michael Tompkins, thanks so much for joining us today on AgeWise.
My pleasure, Dan. My pleasure to be here.
Dr. Tompkins, I said in the intro, this is one of the most requested topics that we've ever covered on the show. So I'm thrilled to have you here today. We're going to dig in around, I think, some of the most important elements of hoarding disorder, and that's how, as a family caregiver, you can help address the issue that may be presenting in a loved one. For the layperson that's listening to this episode of AgeWise, is there a simple measure by which you can clearly say, this is clinically defined hoarding disorder, or these are hoarding behaviors? Or is it not that easy to define?
Well, I think that the distinction between what is a late life hoarding behavior versus hoarding disorder, that, being able to identify late life hoarding behavior is actually fairly straightforward. It's like you meet a person who's engaged in a particular behavior that they have not engaged in the past, right? Which we're talking about here is hoarding. That would then, if indeed that has a sudden onset, then what you want to be doing is actually taking your loved one in to meet with a medical professional to have that person evaluated. Did they have a stroke? Did they have some other cerebral event or brain event, to rule that out. That can be ruled in or ruled out fairly quickly, in a sense, but with by a medical professional. Hoarding disorder is a bit more complicated than that, and you would have to, then it would be necessary, if you have a person with lifelong hoarding behavior, lifelong excessive collecting and saving, in the absence of a mental health, a comprehensive mental health evaluation with someone who's experienced in diagnosing and assessing this particular kind of problem. That would be the thing to do. You really need to get them into a mental health professional who actually has expertise in actually not only evaluating this problem, but treating it.
When you think about whether it's clinical hoarding disorder or hoarding behavior, what are the physical implications specifically for an older adult? Since that's the focus of AgeWise and the family caregivers that this program is addressed to, what are the things we should be most concerned about when it comes to the environment that is unique to an older adult?
Terrific. So let's focus now exclusively on hoarding disorder. All right. Okay. So there is this concept that I use, which is this idea of harm potential. Right? Harm potential is kind of an index of the risk associated with person in place. Right? Meaning the person living in their environment. Right? And our ability to live effectively in an environment is not just influenced by how much stuff we have, but it also is influenced by our functional capacity, right? Now, as we age, and this is true, I think, for all of us, as we age, we start to have both physical and mental limitations that are completely normal, age-related physical and mental changes that make it more difficult for us to maintain our living environments.
One of the most challenging parts of our sort of point of entry into helping families that are dealing with some form of hoarding behavior, because we're called in to deal with the physical environments. And time again, the family caregiver, the loved one that we're on the phone with, that we're having the discussion over, is frustrated. It's generally something that's been building for years. The loved one doesn't want to hear it anymore. What's your advice on how to broach the topic in the most constructive and productive ways to move beyond the defensive behaviors that are avoiding help and to, at a minimum, open a helpful dialogue to start to address the environment and then the underlying psychological and emotional challenges?
That's the question, Dan, right? And the answer is, and I'll say more about it, is that, fix the relationship before you fix the environment, right? So, and it starts with actually, depending upon how distressed your relationship is, it starts with you fixing that. And one of the ways to fix that is to start having different conversations with the loved one. Now, this will take time because the loved one is going to have years of interacting with family members in a particular way.
Dr. Tompkins, that makes perfect sense. But I want to share with you a real conversation, and I'll change some of the elements so we're not exposing anything that's private. But I think this will make complete sense to you. The family member calls. Mom has fallen in the home, been discovered by EMTs. She's been on the ground for over a day and a half, and she's still unwilling to actually acknowledge that there's a clutter issue. There's a safety issue, or what you defined earlier as harm potential. How do you balance the fact that the next fall may not actually be something to recover from with, I'm going to change the relationship? So where is the moment in time where safety trumps having to work on the longer term issues? Do you have to toggle back and forth? How do you handle that?
You do have to toggle back and forth. If I went into someone's home with, and I thought they were in imminent danger, then I would do what I would do. I would do what I would do, right? And sometimes that's the case, but not always is that the case, right? And secondly, when an event like this happens, you would want to alert, the person's, the discharge nurses or discharge social workers or whatever about the situation at home, if they're not already aware of it, and hopefully have a plan around that. But what it comes down to in situations like this, Dan, and this is a very difficult for family members to accept. I know you will get this, but people have the right to make choices in their lives for lots of things, including how they live, unless they've been determined in a court of law that they do not have that capacity to do that. Right? But the vast majority of individuals, older adults with hoarding disorder, have intact capacity.
You did say a second ago that there's a moment where you do what you have to do. And as a family member, short of having somebody Baker acted or bringing in a legal scenario where you're imposing something on them, are you suggesting that a direct and blunt conversation about the safety risk that mom or dad or my spouse is in because of the collected accumulation, that's okay to do?
Yeah. In fact, I would see it as an opportunity. I would say the conversation is really about now moving into harm, reducing harm reduction, right? So the conversation isn't in that moment like, Mom, we've just got to clear out everything in this house so you're safe. No, the conversation is, Mom, we want you to stay in your home. You want to stay in your home. You've had this accident. It's no one's fault. This is what can happen for people when they reach a certain age who live in a very cluttered environment. It was inevitable. We knew it was going to happen at some point. This is not your fault, right? But we want you to stay in your home. And so in order to stay in your home, what we're asking of you is to work with us to kind of like keep things clear enough so that you're safe, keep walkways clear of clutter enough so that you can kind of move from kitchen to bedroom, to keep doors, swing arches open enough so that an EMT can get in if something happens like this again. Will you be willing to work with us to do that, and only that?
I want to move into now, those are areas around physical environment, reducing harm potential, making things safer, which in many respects, while they are very difficult jobs and we do them every day, every week, all year long, they're almost easier to deal with than the underlying driver for the behavior itself, correct? So talk to me about how you use cognitive behavioral therapy to start to address the underpinning of why somebody's collecting. And that concludes part 1 of our very special 2-part episode of Age-Wise, all about hoarding behaviors, hoarding disorder. Be certain to tune in next week when we air part 2 to find out more about how to resolve the underlying issues.